Welcome, everyone. Here we are in Parashat Yeshev, the first of 4 long parshiot dedicated to the story of Joseph and his brothers. We might ask why. What does the Torah want to teach us in spending so much time on this story of Joseph? He gets more space time. He gets more space than anybody else in the Sefer Bereshit, more than Abraham, more than Isaac, more than Jacob. What's it all about? The other thing to ask is this story a secular story? The hand of God does not appear in this story at all. God is there as somebody people refer to, but God never acts in all the 4 chapters of the Joseph story. All the action is human, as though things unfold naturally in the course of human events. This is what happens. This is a holy, this worldly story. What's it doing in the Torah? Why should it spend so much time telling us this story? The story of Joseph is parallel, as others have pointed out, to another story in the Bible that is very similar in lots of ways, and that's the story of Esther in the Megillah. First of all, they're both tales of the Israelite or the Jew in the court of the non-Jewish king. And what happens there, how the Israelite works and is effective in that grand courtroom setting. They also both have very complicated plots, with subplots. In the story of Esther, it's Bigtan and Teresh. In the story of Joseph, it is the baker and the butcher, the baker and the barman, I guess we call him, Sarofim v'saro mashkim. What are they doing there? In both cases, they're side figures, not important to the story itself, but without whom the story could not have happened. They play a key role in the unfolding of the plot. Think about figures like that in Shakespeare's plays, maybe based on the biblical example, I don't know. But you have these side plots with complicated plots with side characters. But the main thing to notice is both of them are stories where God simply does not act. God does not appear as an actor on the stage of history, on the stage of human events. Is this telling us that despite all that has happened already in Bereshit, the call to Abraham, the promises to Jacob, everything else, the world still goes on? There still is a natural world, and we have to recognize that. Things still happen in sequence. There aren't miracles all the time where God interferes. And still people have to learn decency. Joseph has to resist Potiphar's wife. The passion of the story of the descent of the brothers, and then the figure of Binyamin. Or is it teaching us that within all this, there is a hidden hand of God? That God is active, but we don't see it. That's usually the way the story of Esther is interpreted by the Midrash and by the Kabbalistic tradition, which uses it tremendously. This is a secret story of how the Hashgacha Pratit takes place even behind the scenes. But the story of Joseph is the place to tell you about something I heard from my revered teacher Abraham Joshua Heschel, with whom I had the great zchut to be a student. He said, "What's the theme of Sefer Bereshit? What's all of Sefer Bereshit about? It's about one question: how do I live with my brother? How do I live with my brother?" From the story of Cain and Abel, right down to the story of Joseph, with Isaac and Ishmael in between, and Jacob and Esau in between, and topped off at the very end with Ephraim and Manasseh, the story is over and over and over again. How do I live with my brother? And so we have this very poignant verse in the beginning of our parasha, which seems to lay out the whole thing. Joseph is wandering, looking for his brothers who are shepherding somewhere, and somebody asks him, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Et achai anochi mevakesh." I seek my brothers. And you can sort of feel that as a universal human cry. Et achai ani mevakesh. We need brothers, but it's so hard to live with them. We can't live without our brothers, but sometimes it's very difficult to live with them. You have people lording it over brothers, like Joseph in his dreams. And then the figure of Yehuda who comes out on top. Now, of course, Bible scholars say this is about the relative strength of the various tribes that were coming together to form the people. But we'll see this. We'll look at the story just as it is within itself. The dynamic of relationship between the brothers, Reuven and Yehuda and Binyamin, and all of them as they interact with Joseph, is just an incredible story. And it outlines that whole theme of Et achai anochi mevakesh. How do I live with? I seek my brother, but how do I live with my brother? I want to read you a couple of verses now, not from our Parsha, but from the beginning of Sefer Shmot, because Heschel then said, the rest of the Torah, the 4 books of the Torah, are an answer to that question. The Torah comes to teach us, how do I live with my brother? That's what all the mitzvot ben adam lamakom are about. How do I create a society where my brother and I can live in both love and justice with one another? And that begins with the story of Moses coming back to Egypt. Remember, Moses has this great revelation at the burning bush. He goes and collects his wife and children from Yitro, and then he goes back to Egypt. And then the Torah says, I'm reading Shmot 4:27, Vayomer Adonai el Aharon lech likrat Moshe hamidbara. God said to Aaron, go greet Moses in the wilderness. Vayelech v'yifkesheu b'har Elohim vayishaklo. And he went and met him at the divine mountain. Was that where the snow was? Seems to be. Har Elohim Choreva. Seems to be the divine mountain. And he kissed him. And from that moment on, Moses and Aaron are together, are bound together in a kind of intimate way. Vayagid Moshe LaHaron et kol divrei Adonai asher shlacho. Moses told Aaron about all the words of God who had sent him. Vet kol ha'otot asher tzivao, and all the signs he commanded him to do. And then it says, interestingly, grammatically, Vayelech Moshe v'Aaron v'yasvu et kol ziknei bnei Yisrael. Moses and Aaron went and gathered all the elders of Israel. It doesn't say Vayelchu Moshe v'Aaron. It says Vayelech Moshe v'Aaron. And the commentators say they went as one. They became one person in doing their task. They became one person for the rest of the Torah in carrying out the vision. Moshe creating the courts, Aaron creating the worship. Moshe representing a certain amount of midat hadin. He cared about justice. Aaron caring very much about compassion and love. Ohev shalom v'rodef shalom, pursuing peace always. It took 2 of them. It took both of them to create the people Israel. The pursuit of justice and the opportunity for loving one's neighbor and one's brother. That's what it's all about. Sometimes the people who are closest to us are the hardest ones to live with. But we have to learn. There is no alternative. That's why we have Torah. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. See you next week.